I'm here with Al
Al
Bailey,
Bailey, I use the middle name.
John Al Bailey. Albert
Bailey is the initial. You can use forms too, never room for me. So it's Al.
Okay. And today is the
Third
3rd of April,
3rd of April, a Tuesday.
2018, and I'm here at this University Commons
This is University Commons and Arbor.
in Ann Arbor. And let's get started now. I see, actually, you were born, you're a New Jersey person.
Jersey boy.
Patterson,
I was born in Patterson.
is that right?
Grew up, folks moved to a little suburb of Patterson called Hawthorne, north, near Ridgewood area. And I really went to school in, I think, the first year in Patterson, but then public schools in Hawthorne,
In Hawthorne, yeah.
elementary and high school.
And where did you went to high school in Hawthorne?
Right, graduated from high school at Hawthorne.
Then you went to
Then I went to undergraduate work at Notre Dame.
Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I was there for those years, graduated in 51, and then went into I was really in the Marine Corps before that. My dad was a Marine in First World War. He was in Haiti. So this was my service of choice, let's say. But they had an officer program where students went down to Quantico for a period of 6 weeks, 1 year and then a second year, also down there for 6 weeks. And at the end of that, assuming we were graduated, then we were commissioned at that point.
Oh,
And then, as with all the Marines, sent back to Quantico again for basic school. That was really about 6 months. Then it was shortened because the Korean War was going on.
oh, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. That began in 50, and of course.
So were you commissioned at that time?
Yes, I was commissioned on graduation in June of 51, and then called to active duty in October of 1951. And that was the first active duty, as I've said, is the basic school. All Marine Corps officers go through that protocol. It normally is about 9 months, but ours was shortened to 6 because of the Korean War. I think they needed people more quickly than that. Excuse me.
So you actually went to Korea then?
Well, not originally. I did the basic school, and then I went down to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, the 6th Marine Regiment, and I was a platoon leader down there. Let's see, the rest of 52 and into beginnings of, no, I guess it was mostly just 52 at Lejeune. Interesting base, but not good if you're single, you're out there in the boonies quite a bit.
Is that right?
Yeah, and some interesting places to go to, but a lot of field work down there, a lot of amphibious operations we practiced, and I figured, I better volunteer to get out of here. And one way to be sure of getting out was going to Korea. Yeah. So I sailed over there. We were out at Camp Pendleton for, I guess it was about a best part of a month at Camp Pendleton, staging regiment, sort of immediate preparation for Korea. 1 week of which was one of the worst of mine in the Corps, I think. We were up in the Sierra Nevada mountains, Pickle Meadows, in December. So you can imagine that was a lot of fun. I guess they were going to prepare us for the cold weather in Korea, and it did that okay, but it was tough. Yeah, sleeping under the tents and the air mattresses.
Oh God!
In the snow. So we sailed. The end of about mid-December, I think. We had Christmas aboard ship, which was then about a 2-week jaunt across the
Was it?
Pacific. Yeah, yeah. Ships were slow. They were MSTS ships, I think, commissioned. They weren't military Navy ships, but they were commissioned to bring servicemen back and forth to Korea. Those, of course, were the days before you fly over now, of course. And Mary flew into Vietnam on our doing, but it was 2 weeks aboard ship, which was an interesting experience. A lot of movies seen, a lot of drills done, but for the most part, pretty soft living.
Was it?
Yeah, we had pretty nice quarters and wardroom and all that with the Navy. If you know the Navy, you know that they have their comforts, but they have their tough times too.
Sure they do, yes. But they're a choice outfit.
Yeah, well, we like to think that.
Chosen outfit.
Yeah. Well, it was an interesting experience, and I stayed in for the reserves too for a while after Korea. But
did you see any action in Korea?
Yeah, when I went over there in December of '52, we arrived. Very early January, probably when we arrived. Yeah, January of '53. Yeah, war was still going on. I joined the 5th Marine Regiment as a platoon leader. And at that point, the 5th Marine Regiment was in reserve. The idea in Korea was to have 2 regiments online up at the MLR. And then I guess the 1st and 7th regiments were up there, and the 5th was in reserve. Then I think in February we went up online, and we were located very close to Panmunjom, you know, the truce area you see in the news still today. When those truce talks were going on, I remember we could see from our positions over to see the barrage balloons over the peace site. They flew them there, I guess, for some sort of security. So it was an interesting area, to say the least. We were north of Seoul, and closer to Uijeonbu, I think, was our closest town we go to. But when we were online, of course, we didn't get back to any of that. But later on, we would.
Were you a platoon leader at that time?
Yes. Yeah. Platoon leader, first Baker Company, the 1st Battalion.
You would have been promoted to 1st Lieutenant by that time.
Yeah, I was promoted to 1st Lieutenant, I think, before we left Pendleton. Yeah, I think I was 1st Lieutenant when we arrived in Korea. Yeah, that was kind of an automatic promotion.
Yes, it was.
As long as you kept yourself somewhat out of trouble. Yeah, I think it was. And I think we promoted faster then because of the war, and they needed.
My father was so proud when I made 1st Lieutenant. I kept telling him, Dad, there's nothing I could have done not to make 1st Lieutenant.
The silver bar looked better than the gold one.
Yes, yes.
What outfit were you with?
I was in the Medical Service Corps.
Interesting.
I spent my entire career in Fort Sam Houston, Brooke Army Medical Center.
Oh yes, Barry was familiar with Fort Sam. That's where the nurses go, you know, for their first training.
Yes.
We have somebody who lives here in University Commons who's in the Medical Service Corps. He was, and he had his MD by that time, and he went over to Korea for a year or so. I think he was pretty far behind the lines. It wasn't a MASH type deal, but I think he was involved with something with the prisoners of war. His name is Ed Marcus, and I'll give him one of these.
Okay, I wish you would, yes.
Interviewing him, too.
I remember Korea for a lot of reasons, one of which was one of my very good friends was one of the first casualties. He got killed in Korea. He was there for not even a day, I think. It just
early in the war, wasn't it?
Yes, early in the war. Yeah. But were you when the Allied forces were up close to China, or when they came down, or
No, this was after that, yeah.
after that?
Yeah, that was the early years, 50 and 51, Chosen Reservoir and all of that, yeah.
So
yeah.
at that time, it was, take hill number
Oh, yeah.
530 or whatever.
And a lot of it was then, a great deal of movement of the war. I mean, we went up there, and the Marine Corps went up there with the Army, and then when the Chinese came in, of course, it was a massive retreat by everybody, including the Marines out of the Chosen Reservoir. But no, we were back in the States then. In fact, I guess I was still at college then, yeah, when all that happened. When we arrived, it was a pretty stabilized line. The main line of resistance, MLR, was quite well established. Patrol actions went out on both sides. Chinese. We were opposite the Chinese, by the way, which we always, as we look back at it, thinks we were somewhat lucky in that the North Koreans were the other people who were not good to be against.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Worse than the Chinese?
Pardon?
They were worse than the Chinese?
Yeah, very definitely.
Oh,
Chinese were interesting opponents. We never saw that much of them across the lines, but we heard many stories of some outfits. The British Commonwealth Division was on our right flank for a while, and they would send out ambulances at times to pick up casualties from patrols, and they claimed the Chinese never fired at them once they saw the Red Cross on it. And Mary and I spent 2 years in China, and that's why
I had to hunt you up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, they did.
A casualty in Korea,
Mm-hmm.
and it was practically when he landed. I don't remember the exact details, and I couldn't find out anything because I wasn't related, so they wouldn't give me any information.
Those were chaotic days.
Yes.
When they first deployed, yeah. I think a lot of the troops were sent into action those first months had been in Japan as occupation forces, so they obviously, were not combat trained at all in that sense to prepare for it, but they're the only ones who were close to go, so a lot of them suffered very heavy casualties. Yeah. That was that Pusan perimeter early in the war, yeah. But see, when I got there, that had all stabilized. The back and forth had ceased, and the 38th parallel, roughly, was where the division was, it was divided, I should say. Though the line actually went farther north on the east side, and farther south of the 30th on the west side where we were.
It's interesting. I didn't realize that the Chinese were more attuned to what the Red Cross meant than.
Well, yeah, of course. Now that's a general statement. I can't vouch for the fact that there weren't some real troubles found, but yeah, we heard some stories of that. The Brits, as I said, were close to us. It was an interesting war in the fact we had British and French troops, Turkish troops, all of one. We didn't see all of those, but we did see some of the Brits who they were right on their right flank, the British Commonwealth Division. And they had some good experiences. Yeah, I can't say anything personally that I've related to any of the Chinese at that time. Although Mary and I were in China for 2 years in the late 1980s. I had a Fulbright there at Guangzhou, a university in South China, not too far from Hong Kong, but it was in the PRC. And I talked to a number of Chinese who had been in Korea, so it was very interesting to hear their standpoint. And Mary, I think, met one Chinese gal who'd been a Chinese nurse who was in Vietnam helping out the North Vietnamese Viet Cong people. So she had some connections. So anyway, it was a situation where we sent out patrols. And actually, although the war was described as rather quiet in 52, 53, the truce came end of July 53, July 27th, I think. And but prior to that, the patrols were sent out, and there were fairly heavy casualties at the time. Yeah, it was very dangerous. Chinese were very good. We had a lot of artillery fire coming in on us from time to time, and a lot of mortar fire too that came in. And the Chinese were very good with their mortars. I used to tell people I met in China later on that if they'd been any better, I wouldn't be there on the phone, right? Particularly. And we got a couple of rounds real close to us at one point. The battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel, was touring the trenches where my platoon was, along with our company commander. And as they scooted along, it was a T-shaped deal, you know, you could come back this way, and then the trenches were out this, so we were over here on that flank of it. And the Chinese started raining in mortars on us. They must have been observing, even from that distance, very well, because the mortars started coming in right along that trench.
Oh, is that right?
Good. So what we did was all try to scurry out of there, back to the T place that would be back of the lines. And as we got there, I remember my platoon sergeant was with me, Red, I forget his last name now, and you know, when you're trained as a Marine Corps officer, you're always trained to take care of your troops first. And we got to this exit about the same time to go back on the T. And I said, Red, you go ahead, and I'll follow you up. And he went up, and sure enough, a mortar came right in. Got him on the foot and leg, so it wasn't a fatal thing. But I figured that if I'd gone first, it would have been me.
Oh,
Yeah. So, but many people have worse war stories than that, I'm sure.
Well, I interviewed a guy who was in Europe, and he was either the luckiest or most unlucky guy. He and a group were, I guess there were 3 of them, that were in a machine gun, and 2 of the guys were killed, and he survived. Then they were going down a street someplace in Belgium, I guess, and he was the only one that survived there.
Wow, we got him, yeah.
They got him in the Battle of the Bulge.
Oh boy, bad news, yeah.
And he was wounded there, and they took him to the aid station, and the physician said, oh, well, let's amputate. And he said that lucky guy that he went to high school with was one of the aides. And he said to the physician, no. He says, let's see what happens. And he saved his leg.
Thank you. So,
As I say, he
so
was-
they didn't amputate it.
No, they didn't.
That's interesting.
And as I say, he was the
Yeah.
luckiest guy I ever interviewed. I mean,
Oh,
just,
wounded that bad. Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. I think many of the physicians felt that way, you know, that they didn't have all the technique and suppose they
No,
do today.
no.
So amputation was probably the best
pretty
thing.
common stuff
Yeah.
at that time, yeah.
And worse in the Civil War, you know.
Oh,
They would
yes.
amputate, yeah. They
Yeah.
just had her right away.
Hardly any anesthesia.
Without any anesthesia.
Yes.
Biting the bullet, as the expression came.
Isn't
Yeah.
that terrible?
Was also before the germ theory was widely accepted, you know. So
Yeah.
as far as reasons for infection during the Korean Civil War, they were just at a loss, you know, to determine what to do, even cleanliness or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny.
So you got out of Korea, you came back home.
Yeah, well, I had another interesting experience after the truce. Of course, things were quieting down, and they needed someone back at Division Headquarters to be the Board of Awards officer. Interesting job. They got me. I guess they thought I was fairly literate. Well, what our job was to sort through all the applications for awards for the entire division and write them up as some form to it, but we could write them up with some freedom, particularly, and then they would be circulated to a board of high-ranking officers, 05s, 06s probably, for the most part, and then the commanding general would have the final say, of course, to sign it. So we had a number of Congressional Medals of Honor,
That's what I was going to ask you.
Crosses, yeah, Silver Stars, a lot of Bronze Stars, of course,
Yes.
both meritorious and actually combat related. So it was an interesting job. Yeah, had a good staff of Marines who were also had been selected, I guess mostly college grads, who helped write these things up. And we would go down often to the hospital ships to visit the wounded there, who we were writing about or had some connection with the whole operation. By copter from the Marine headquarters, the division headquarters, down to Incheon Harbor. They had the Navy hospital ships down there, and that's where most of the Marines went for combat, at least at that stage of the war. So it was an interesting experience, yeah. There was also a Danish hospital ship, the Jutland, I think it was called, as part of the United Nations effort, and they were in the harbor too. So once in a while we would land on the Danish ships, which was good because they had beer, of course. The Navy couldn't do that, of course. So we had beer for a meal with them and the Danish people. But that was an interesting experience, yeah, because we dealt with a lot of the senior officers.
Were you able to recommend the Medal of Honor, or
Not as such, no. We wrote it up, and well, I guess in a sense we could recommend, yes. Yeah, comparing on what was done. You can size up these things pretty quickly. You know, there are a lot of, at least so even some of the Bronze Stars, or Silver Stars, people were doing pretty routine things, but they did their jobs well. And the idea was, well, if you're over in Korea, you're not going to turn down too many people going after this. Some of them had gone through difficulties, you know. Or even after the truce, of course, it was easier. There wasn't the combat to worry about. But still, it was a truce. It wasn't a peace deal. So people were up on the line still, just in case things would go on. So we did recommend a lot, and I had a friend who was recommended by his commanding officer, who's in the Ranger Battalion, for the Navy Cross, which is the second highest, as you know. And I remember writing that up. I made sure when that was written up that it was written up very well, because I knew this guy. He'd been through basic school with him, and I knew he was a heck of a fine officer. I don't think he was wounded, but he did a lot to help his troops.
Well, I interviewed, did you know of Charlie Kittles?
I've heard that name. I know of him,
He's a Medal of Honor winner now. He wasn't when he was in Korea. I'm sorry, in Vietnam.
Vietnam, But
and
I've read about him.
The problem is that he was just the most low-key guy you ever want to meet. You know. And after his interview with me, we got together and went through a 4.5-year process of getting him the Medal of Honor.
Oh, yeah. Well, a lot of that has gone on. You know, it's a very scattered sort of deal, who was recommended. And, you know, you're liable to get someone who would have been recommended by his superior officer, but the superior officer was killed or wounded and shipped out. So the recommendation didn't go anywhere. And I think there was some discrimination, too, against some of the black troops, especially in Vietnam. We didn't have that many in the Marine Corps at all, but there were many of them who probably should have gotten awards and did not. But of course, that was true of many of the white troops too.
Sure,
You
sure.
never know.
Well,
Yeah.
Charlie was really, it took 4.5 years, but there was no question that he was,
Deserving of it.
he was deserving, yeah. And
Fortunately, you could get enough backing for it.
yeah, well, the thing is that if something, I don't know if it was at that time, but if the action occurred more than 5 years ago, you really had to go through a special process.
Right. Which was time consuming.
And that
I'm
was
sure.
time consuming, yes.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Whereas during the war itself, the decorations could come pretty, once the system was established, they could move fairly quickly at that point. Didn't have as much bureaucracy to deal with. And if the commanding general recommended it, that was pretty much it, yeah. I remember one application for, I think it was for a Navy Cross, wasn't a Goshen Medal of Honor. It was written up by a guy who'd already won a Silver Star and a Bronze Star, I think. And although what he did was good, but not great in the sense of danger. And the commanding general just X'd the whole thing and said, I believe this man has been sufficiently rewarded for his service. And once that was there, then you were.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we had all sorts of we had the Air Wing, they were always putting in for air medals.
Oh, yes.
And they all had many of those up. It wasn't fun to fly around there, but it was a lot easier as far as the awards go than many of the ground troops.
Yeah. With Charlie, of course, he didn't make any objection to this. I mean, he took his Silver Star, and as far as he was concerned, he didn't even deserve that. So, as I say, he was a very low-key guy.
There are a lot of people like that. Who was that guy from Wisconsin who wrote that book, The Flags of Our Fathers?
Yes.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very famous statement in that, very true. The real heroes were the ones who never came home.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was, but he didn't push that at all. I think his family found up in the attic once a Navy Cross he'd never talked about.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I forget his name too, Bill, and he was well known when he wrote that book. Or was it his son who wrote the book? I'm not sure. But it was Flags of Our Fathers as the title. It may have been made into a movie, but I'm not sure. But there's much truth to that, yeah. It's a hit and miss thing with Casualty Awards, and you try to do as well as possible. But in the midst of a war, it's not the same as sitting here quietly, having your records and everything done, yeah. But it was a good job. I met a lot of interesting situations and people. And since I was the chief officer on the awards, Board of Awards, even though I was the first lieutenant, it meant that I had some powers that I never had before. I'd get a call from the commanding general's aides that the general wanted a copter, so we would fly down to Incheon to one of the Navy hospitals. And I remember calling up the Air Wing guy and saying, it's Lieutenant Bailey, I think it's Major, I want a request for a copter. He said, I think, yes, Lieutenant, what is it? This minor lieutenant disturbing him. And I said, I'm calling on behalf of the commanding general. Said, yes, Lieutenant. Yes, Lieutenant. What can we do for you? Yeah, you could use that power thing. And not all the time, of course, but for many times. So we had good experiences going down there. Once it was summer, and it's very difficult for those little Huey hospital helicopters to fly in the hot weather. They don't have enough lift, I guess. And so one came to pick me up to take me down by myself once, the hospital ship, and he said, we're going to have to balance this copter in this weather very carefully. So what I want you to do is lie out on the gurney, outside the copter. You would have a plastic shield over your head, the way the wounded soldiers were, or Marines were brought back. And so and you do crazy things at the time. And I said, oh, why not? Sure. I won't have to sit there. I can find. So I had this thing. I was my head looking out of the plastic and flying right down to the gun. And when we got to the hospital ship, they saw us coming in. And with me lying out there, they all rushed up, thinking, this is a wounded guy.
Right.
Yeah. And we had Navy nurses, too, to see there. It was interesting indeed. Yeah, you think of some of the stories. You don't realize at that age what experiences you're going through. And
Yeah,
you probably
right.
would agree with this too. You sort of take them as a matter of course and do all sorts of stuff like this. Because you're indestructible, of course. You're never going to get hurt.
When did you make your captain bars?
Well, after I was released from active duty, we sailed back, of all places, into San Francisco. Great view of the States. First time in a year, we'd seen the States under the Golden Gate. And I was released from active duty at Treasure Island, which was a Navy, Marine Corps base station, I should say. And didn't do anything for about a year. And then I was back in Jersey thinking of going to grad school at Fordham, my master's degree. And some of my friends said, we've got a good reserve outfit, Marine Corps reserve outfit over here in Dover, Jersey, just maybe 20 miles west of Jersey. And you could use the money, it was fairly good if you go up there once every 2 weeks, once a month, I guess, for the weekend and things. So I said, well, sure, why not? So then, of course, I had been a flight lieutenant for many years, and I think the captaincy came through after about a year or two of my reserve service, which was pretty easy. We would drive up there and we'd have our drills for the day. I don't think we even spent the weekend, except once in a while. But in the summer, we had 2 weeks of active duty we were required to do. So we often went down to Quantico, mostly courses and this or that. Nothing that spectacular, but it was nice to be back in the Marine Corps for a while and see that.
Yeah. What I do is I get the film to make a DVD out of it.
Okay.
And then I send the DVD to the Library of Congress.
Right, I remember that, reading about that.
Yes, and I also, we also have a local website, and that's on that information.
Right.
So that, the Library of Congress is a great place, but it takes forever to get anything.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it takes it's a lot sooner that we can get it on our local website. So that's what I usually tell people, look to the local
Look
website.
at it that way, yeah. Interesting. So you would have the entire interview of what we've done today.
Right. What I usually do is I write a summary of it. And when you go into the website, what you'll see is a picture of the veteran, a summary, and then it'll say, check the video.
With all the
And the
detail.
video, then
Interesting.
I'll have the whole interview, yes.
It's good. How did you get involved in it to start with?
Well, it's a long and short story, I guess. First off, it's I was asked by a history professor at EMU if the Rotary was interested in a veterans project, and I said, well, sure. And then I developed a couple, 3 small grants, and we got some equipment, and we were off and running. The other part of it was that I had 4 uncles who were in World War II.
Really?
And a brother and a cousin. Now, my 4 uncles saw action as my cousin did, One of them was in the landing on in Normandy.
D-Day.
Yeah.
Mm.
And when we looked around, there wasn't word one that we had of any of these people.
Mm.
So, you know, we kind of had a collective guilt in the family about
Yeah.
not recording anything from these people.
Yeah.
So that
All
helped.
of whom had stories, I'm sure.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they had stories, but my this I guess that would have been the best story would have been my Uncle Rudy. And when they had the 50th reunion of
Mm.
the landing, I asked him if he was going to go, and he
Yeah.
said, "Hell no, there's nothing I want to remember about that."
Yeah. Yeah.
He's shorter than I am. He didn't know how to swim. His ship or boat or whatever it was didn't get into the beach, so the water was over his head. He almost drowned.
Yeah.
He finally
what
got to
found
the beach. He was machine gunned. It got to the hedgerow, I guess, and was hit with all sorts of shrapnel.
Oh boy. Yeah.
When the medic came to look at the guy who was next to him, the guy said, "Hey, take care of Rudy. He's, you know, his wife's pregnant."
Yeah.
So he did, and I'm sure that aid saved my
Saved
uncle's
his
life.
life, probably so.
Yeah, the guy that said, you know, go take care of Rudy,
Mm.
unfortunately, he died.
Wow.
But we had pictures of my uncle, and when he was in Walter Reed, looked like he'd been in a concentration camp.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
He's just terrible. But
But he
That's-
survived.
yeah, so that's some of the reason that I got
Yeah.
involved in it.
Personal connections.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. I can't match anything like that with families, although my dad and mom too, of course, became associated with the American Legion
Uh-huh.
back in the 30s, made up of World War II veterans. And I've heard many stories from the other fellow. One was in the Navy, World War One. One was also, I think, in sort of a desk job. But then another one was an ambulance driver.
Oh.
In war. And interesting, yes, his son, or I should say his grandson, who lives in Massachusetts, in Plymouth, is now writing a book about
Oh, is that
this
right?
fellow. Yeah, Frank Ritter, I remember very well. He'd tell stories. Of course, as a kid, you'd sit and listen to these veterans
Yeah.
with all their stories.
Mm.
Frank would tell us what it was like, yeah, on the front lines there.
Mm.
Chateau Thierry and some of the areas
Yes.
of the Marne where the action was. And Mary and I were back in Europe once in the 70s, and we had a tour of that area. And I said, gee, I remember Frank Ritter talking about this town, Chateau Thierry, and it was right in the middle of the Champagne country then. Of course, during the war it was not done, but I remember we had a very nice champagne lunch together in a restaurant, and I said, let's just go out and walk around here a little bit. I saw a nice sort of bluff and area, and I thought I'd just snap a picture of that for Frank. And when we got back to the States, I showed him this picture, and he said, that's just where my ambulances were
that
lined up,
right?
because I had shelter from the front lines. Yeah, and I thought, isn't this something?
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's the first war. But that was the group that went up to Vermont, I mentioned before, with all of the kids involved. And there were 4 couples, I think, who were kind of regulars. Little town of Granville up north near Rochester area. Beautiful area. And as a kid, you know, this coming from a Jersey suburb, which was fairly urban, this was a real farm. They were haying and they were bringing the milk down. So for us, it was sort of like a paradise. You could play in the barns and all that.
When did you get married?
When did I get married?
Yes.
Mary and I were married in 1968, so we
So
will
you-
be celebrating our 50th anniversary, and in December the 28th. Yeah,
Uh-huh,
yeah.
okay.
Well, it's an interesting story too. A lot of people ask that, you know, how do you meet? Uh, Mary was a student in Georgetown, finishing up her second year, with the obligation then to go for the Army later on, since they were paying for her bachelor's degree to finish up. And it was her second year, and I then was a teaching assistant at Department of History at Georgetown.
At Georgetown?
Yeah, because I had started my doctorate work the first year, and this was the second year because since I taught a bit before, they asked me to be the teaching assistant, which of course is sort of slave labor, you know.
Yes.
You're not paid much, and you do all this marking of papers for
Less
the major
than.
professors and all that, though they gave me a section of my own to teach because I'd had some teaching experience. And I was sitting there sharing an office with one of the major professors. He had the back part with the big bay window and a nice desk. I was squeezed into this little cubicule at the front, of course. But anyone who came in to see him had to walk through my area. And Mary came to question him about a grade, I think, out of test she'd gotten. And he was not in that day. It was Professor O'Connor, I think his name was. So Mary and I got talking. And she told me later, you know, she knew it was a faculty office, so I must be someone important sitting there. In reality, and I never tried to break her of those illusions for a while. But it's funny how you... And we got talking, and I said, she wasn't a student of mine at all. I said, well, let's try to have lunch together sometime, and gave her a call. She was living in Falls Church, too. That's the suburb just south of Washington, you probably well know. And the chances of us meeting were very scarce because she lived at home. Obviously, she's the eldest of 5 daughters, so they could not afford Georgetown tuition and have her stay in a dorm or anything like that. So she commuted from Falls Church. So the chances of meeting on the campus were very slim.
Yes.
Yeah. Just that one
Slim to
incident.
none, yeah.
Just that one happened, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, yeah, because there were a lot of gals we knew down there. We had parties, and although none of us had any money, we had the gals would come in and cook spaghetti for us and salad, and we'd bring the beer, and we'd sing songs and stuff like that. You know, it's the old ways people lived before television took over.
Yes.
So it was an interesting meeting, and we kept in touch, continued to date over, it would have been 66, but then the summer of 66 she went on to Fort Sam to start her, and I went up to Providence to teach. So
You didn't go down with her at Fort Sam?
no, because I had to stay, we were not engaged or married then, though. We were engaged in 67, I think, just before she went to Vietnam, yeah. No, I had to go up there and teach, and we weren't that serious about marriage at that point. I had much of my doctoral work ahead of me still, and Mary had her Army commitment to do. And we knew after she went down to Fort Sam for that initial time, then they sent her back to Walter Reed, so we were able to get together a bit when I was up in Providence and she was at Walter Reed. But after a year of that, she got orders to Vietnam. So that meant another year of separation. So we really didn't see that much of each other in that engagement period because she was in Vietnam. And as you know, it was the worst year of the war, 67, 68. She was there through Tet and all the rest. Though she served, as she will tell you, at the 3rd Field Hospital, which was the main hospital in Saigon. So that meant she was not on the front lines very much. But they lobbed rockets in.
Sure they did, yeah.
And they were right at Tan Son Nhut. Yeah. Hi.
It was on that table, so I'll just leave it here.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the courtesy, too. So yeah, she had some interesting experiences with casualties. A lot of soldiers and Marines, of course, but also a lot of civilians, you know, came in, babies who'd been hit by some of these mortar attacks and the shelling during, especially during Tet. Although, and they did 12-hour shifts, of course, right through, and some interesting times. So then she came back in '68, and I got a job with the government doing research for the Army Medical Department, which
Oh, is that right?
and yeah, they were out at it's in the D.C. area, but what was the name of that place? It was just inside the Beltway. I forget what it's near Connecticut Avenue area. Anyway, I worked there for a couple of years because we wanted to be married then and stay somewhat close together, and for her family too, after she was away for a year. So we were married then, and then I continued the government job, which I really didn't like. It was a civil service job, and with a lot of the kind of dry research to do, and also I didn't care for the return. One nice thing about academic life is you work a lot of hours, but you're free to spread them out the way you want to, you know, and so getting to work at 7:45 every morning was not the thing I cared for. I'm not much of a morning person. It's gotten worse since I'm older, I guess.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Mary's very much a morning person. She's up and goes to bed early at night.
Yeah.
I stay up later at night, and then we get up, but she gets up a little earlier than I do, but yeah, I can get up in the morning. I just don't like to have the idea of getting to work.
Yes. Do you have any children?
No, we don't.
No?
No, no, we married late, and I think we would have
Ouch.
accepted them, yeah. Except a time of career then was one where I was still getting settled in teaching after coming out of the service and a government job. And then Mary also had the Army commitment to make.
How long were you teaching at PC?
2 years,
2
two
years?
academic years, yeah. I went up in '66, and then I guess it was the summer of '68 I came back to Washington, and then had my doctorate then, and then we were married, lived in Bethesda for the first 2 or 3 years of our marriage, I thought, yeah. So we both had aging parents, especially mine were aging, so we wanted something so we could get up to Jersey to see them, yeah. And Mary, of course, having been away for a while, was anxious to be back in her area too, Washington, D.C. So that was our first married years, and then we decided maybe it would be better to be off on our own for a while, especially after my parents had, they'd been ill for quite a while then, and we knew we'd have to get to see them. But it was hard to get a job in academia then. It was the early '70s, yeah, especially in the, tough for history and humanities, yeah. A lot of people were recruited after World War I or after World War II for teaching, and that was true of the '50s and '60s. But there was a slump in the '70s, maybe something to do with the birth rate. I'm not sure.
Was it just for history, or was it the
Mostly in
sciences?
the humanities, yeah. Now Mary was the opposite. They were then pushing nursing faculty because they wanted nurses with their bachelor's and possible degrees above that. So she was very much in demand with her experience. So we ended up down at the University of Alabama in Huntsville.
Oh, did you?
Huntsville, Alabama. Yeah.
That must have-
Here's our friend out here. Yeah. That's that beautiful Gogan, yeah.
Wow, that's some dog.
Pretty dog, yeah, he is a dog. His name is Finn.
Chin?
Very, Finn is
Finn,
a Frank.
oh.
Yeah, yeah. That's Ellen Finch is the owner of the dog. Yeah, wonderful dog. Not overly friendly, but you can make friends easy by giving him a dog biscuit. Then he's your friend. Yeah, So we were there, yeah, at University of Alabama. For
When
3
did you get to Michigan?
Yeah, very much connected with what I've just said. Mary was very much in demand. We had interesting 2 or 3 years in 72 to 75 in Huntsville. We learned a lot about the Southeast, which we didn't know and hadn't traveled in. Atlanta, New Orleans, places like that. But living in Alabama, we decided it was not our thing. We were both from the East.
Yeah, especially at that time.
Yeah, that was early 70s when the
Yeah.
civil rights thing was bad. But it was a little more than that, too. We found a sort of resentment of you would be leaving for vacations. And we both had, as I've said, elderly parents, which we had to go up to see at Christmas time and the rest. So I think there was a bit resentment on that, but I think a lot of it was much the Alabama people are, in general, I have to say it's a generality, very, very closed on their own society and not too receptive to others of different backgrounds. We could sense that. And it was also the South, which I didn't like for the heat, and Mary too, particularly. So we felt we'd better start looking around for something in a way of getting back up to the north would be closer to the parents and more of an area where we'd like to live. And Mary got a lot of invitations to be interviewed at different schools out in Wisconsin and Minnesota, Philadelphia, a couple of other areas. But we were coming up to Ann Arbor, kind of chance. It was a public health conference, which Mary was interested in, and I'd done a little work on too when I was teaching a bit on public health in the United States. And so we were in Ann Arbor for that conference up here in the North Campus, and Mary said, you know, I ought to go over and talk to the people here at the School of Nursing just to see. She hadn't made any formal approach to them, but dropped over, and they, like many schools, were expanding nursing education, especially to get these nurses with their bachelor's degrees and get them out into hospitals and all the rest. So Mary had a nice interview over there, and she said, you know, we ought to consider this in Ann Arbor. We knew it was a nice town. It's the University of Michigan. Everybody knows that. So the outcome was that they did offer her a job, yeah. And because I didn't have one, but I thought, well, we're going to make a move. This is the time to do it. So off we came to Ann Arbor the summer of '75. I don't think we'd even really had a place to live, but we went to this big high-rise Tower Plaza, you know, on the corner, and that looked good. It was the center of town where we wanted to be, and convenient to so much. And Mary was thinking about more graduate work for her degree, so we said, sure, we'll be in there got an apartment up on the 18th floor, and it faced south, so you can see the stadium and, you know, it's a panoramic view. But it was a rental deal, of course. They went condo later, but that was a rental deal. And we found 2 or 3 years there. In the meantime, I'd gotten a job teaching here, so we were more stable. And I said, well, we're going to have to think about doing other things. I think my mom had died in '85, yeah, so we've been here about 10 years at that point, and we moved her out to a nursing home here in Saline, the Evangelical home.
Yes.
Care was very good.
Very good, yes.
Yeah, we're very pleased with that, but it was her latter years. She'd been with a home back in Jersey run by the nuns, which also was very nice, but she was then in her latter 80s, and so we brought her out here for 2 or 3 years. And then she died in '85, I guess it was. And I said to Mary, you know, and now that my mom is gone and my dad had died more previously, Mary's folks were doing fine. and their daughters were all growing up and going to school. So we were relatively free. And I said, I got to see about Fulbright somewhere overseas. Got talking to the people here in the Center for Chinese Studies, also quite by chance. I think was at a lecture over there. And I said, you know, China would be an interesting place to apply for. It was then just opening up. Nixon had done the thing in the early 70s, and it was still a pretty exotic place to think about going. Nowadays, everybody's been to China,
Right.
but not in those days. So we applied for it, and thanks to some connections we had with faculty members who were involved in the selection, we got a Fulbright to Guangzhou and went over there in the university there in Guangzhou for the fall of 86. We went over there the summer of 86. And 2 years. We spent 2 years there, 86 and 88, yeah, which was a very interesting experience there. Guangzhou was good for us because it was close to Hong Kong. When things got a little tough out locally, although the Chinese took good care of us, we had the only air-conditioned areas on the campus, I think, and it was pretty hot.
Were you able to come back to teaching at the U?
Yeah, they gave me leave to do that. You know, it's Fulbright. It was quite a common thing for many faculty members to have. And then Mary, too, had just gotten her doctorate. She got a doctorate here in anthropology. Over the years. She did some part-time work and kept her connections with the U of M School of Nursing over those years. And so she was also free to go over and made an interesting 2 years for both of us. There was enough of old China to appreciate, and yet if things got kind of grim, there were some good hotels downtown. One hotel, I think some of the oil people were in. They were exploiting oil things, American people in the South China Sea. So they had taught the chef at this one hotel, the White Swan it was called, to do Tex-Mex food, which they were all from they were all from Texas area. So Mary said that was great. It's like almost like being home with her family, you know. Yeah. So it was a good 2 years. We traveled around China very much. The first year, thanks to the Fulbright organization and meetings and so forth. But and they asked us to stay for a second year, which we thought we would. We like China and we appreciated it, but I think we stayed on the grounds that we would go to some of the other countries in Asia over that second year.
You did, you say?
Yeah, we did that. Yeah, we stayed for a second year. Same deal at the university in Guangzhou, but we were able to travel with some breaks on a trip, one of which was back to Vietnam. In 88, just 20 years after Mary had been there. And it was during Tet, too. Chinese New Year is the same deal, you know. And we had that experience. So now I've told you all about my life. Yeah.
Well, an interesting life.
Yeah, it has been an
Exciting,
interesting
yes.
life. Yeah, looking back at it, and you know, it's funny in life. You think, oh, I should have done this or that, or made different decisions than we did. We have a few of those to regret, but for the most part, we're very grateful of what we have done. Yeah, both Mary and me.
Yeah.
And Mary still keeps in touch with her sisters back in. Two of them are in Virginia Beach, and then up in Stafford, near Fredericksburg, Virginia. And then the others up in Silver Spring, which is just north of the Beltway in Washington. So we do get back and see them quite a bit.
You know, you're only 5 months older than I am.
True? You are 87? 87?
Going to be 88?
I'll be 88 next month. Yeah, gosh, it is next month. Yeah.
Well, in May, isn't it? Yeah.
May 9th.
Yeah.
Yeah, May 9th is birthday.
Yeah, my My wife will be 88 in May 2nd.
Ah, very good.
Yeah.
And when is your birthday?
October 20th.
Nice time of the year to have
I'm
a
a
birthday.
10, 20, 30 guy.
10, 20, 30. Very good. 10, 20,
I've been looking for somebody who has the same date.
I have a cousin who was born in 35, and when she was born on the 5th of March,
No.
so it's 3535.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I found that Mickey Mantle was a year younger than me, had the same birthday. Joyce Brothers, do you remember Joyce Brothers, the psychologist?
Yes, I do remember that
Yeah.
name, yes.
She had the same birthday, and she was a year older, but I haven't found anybody
Exactly.
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and I've been looking.
Nor have I ever really looked on that. Everybody knows somebody who had the same birthday.
Yes.
Let's see, who was it? Candace Bergen,
Oh,
Edgar Bergen's wife. Remember?
Yes.
Yeah, Charlie McCarthy. Yeah, hers was May 9th. And who was the fellow who was here? He was in the news. U of M guy too, who had a May 9th birthday. Gee, I've forgotten his name now. He was quite well known here. Yeah.
U of M person?
I'm sorry.
A U of M person?
Yeah, he's a graduate of U of M, went on into, gee, I think it was NBC News. Gosh, who was? I have to check that out. Anyway, his is a May 9th, yeah. I haven't found anyone else on that particular date, no. Who you would, or anyone would be well known.
Yeah.
Yeah. Funny how you think about birthdays.
Yeah, trying to think of whether my daughter would know anybody. He wasn't, did he play any athletics or anything?
Not to my knowledge.
So-
No. She graduated, which year was it again, Bill? Your daughter?
My other daughter was a PC.
Oh, that's the one you're talking about, PC graduate, yeah.
My younger daughter went to EMU and to Wayne State. She got a master's degree at Wayne State.
Very good.
But she's been working at the athletic department for 20-something years.
In Wayne State.
No, here.
Oh, EMU.
Yeah. No. At the University
Oh,
of
she's
Michigan.
right here at U of M.
Yeah.
You told me that before, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We're talking about EMU.
Yeah, no.
Stories were going through my mind of
No.
the problems they've had there canceling some of those sports at
Yeah, no.
EMU, yeah.
No.
Yeah. So
But-
she's here with the athletic department.
Yeah, she's been here through,
Where
I
is
don't
her
know.
job specifically?
she's in compliance,
Oh, yeah.
which is not easy.
No, I'm sure not.
No.
That's an interesting job over there, yeah.
Uh-huh.
We have a resident here, Alice Sigler, who's a U of M grad, and she was in the swimming team when she was here. She comes from a rather prominent family in Chicago, and she's now moved back to Ann Arbor, has an apartment right across the hall from us, does volunteer work for the athletic
Oh,
department.
she does?
Very much with swimming and diving, yeah.
Oh,
Women swimming, obviously,
Yeah.
and diving. And in fact, she was off, I think, weekend. I think she gets these trips to go down to San Antonio, to see them in the Final Four.
does she go down there?
Oh, yeah, she was going down there. Yeah.
Oh,
She maybe partly has friends there, I'm not sure. But she does a lot of traveling with them. Yeah, and I think they appreciate it very much because she can give her full time to the volunteer work whenever she wants to.
what's her name again?
Sigler, Sigler.
Sigler.
Alice, Alyce. She's a Chicago girl originally, but
I'll
very
have to
much
ask my
involved.
daughter.
Yeah, I don't know what,
I'm
she's
sure
quite well
She
known.
must know her.
Yeah, because she has kind of a unique job. And she's sort of an unofficial part of the department. She's, see her in the pictures, when they have pictures of that.
Well,
Good to talk with
It's
you.
good talking
yeah,
with you,
and again,
Al.
I feel badly that
I
it's
keep
taken
wanting
so
to call
long.
you Bill Bailey.
Oh,
but-
Bill Bailey, the song. A lot of people do that, yeah. but Bill's your name. You gotta keep it, yeah, yeah. At least it's close in the alphabet, yeah. So what would you like to do? Like you'd like to see Mary, I'm sure.
Yes, I'd like to make an appointment with her.
Good.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make DVDs out of this
Okay.
interview. And I will share those DVDs with you
I would
with as
appreciate
many
that.
or as few as you want.
Sure.
Now, I've had requests for as few as 2 and for as many as 22. So as long as you come in between those 2, you're okay.
Between 2 and 22.
2 and 22.
Yeah, you know, it'd be fun. I'd like to send one to Mary's sisters, I'm sure.
Okay. All right.
They've been, because many of them were in the military.
Uh-huh. So you
Yeah,
got-
one Navy officer, one Army officer, and Mary's sister Susan retired as a full colonel and
wow.
stayed in the reserve for quite a while. Yeah, and so they're very much military oriented for sure. And then
Well, you let me know and you
sure
have
will.
them.
I sure will. I have to tell you one final story.
Sure.
I had Mary's dad's birthday, and we had people invited in. It was a group of about 20 or 30, I guess, of his friends from Falls Church, and he worked for the Department of Labor here, so I came in and I said, you know, someone's going to have to sort of be the MC and to introduce people here after they've had their lunch. And so I said, well, I'm the oldest brother-in-law, I should be the one to do it. And I was thinking of something funny to say for introduction, and I said, some of you were wondering why I was the brother-in-law chosen here, the whole crowd. And I'll tell you why. See, Mary's next sister, she was married to Tom Jennings, a Massachusetts boy, served as an officer in the Navy for much of his time. Susan, next sister, her husband was in the Army, retired as a lieutenant colonel, and Laurie, the youngest sister's husband, is currently serving in the Navy, which he was at that time. And I said, so looking at all these 3 backgrounds, I have to tell you that I served in the Marine Corps, so obviously always gets a laugh in Washington, you know. But it has been a pleasure talking with you.
Pleasure.
Do I have to do anything more for you?
No,
You
you
want
don't.
this, I'm sure.
No, I made these for Mary.
Oh yeah, we have some extra ones, and
Yes,
these you've given me, okay.
Yes.
I'm gonna keep your envelope here and
Yes,
keep
and-
the bookmark too.
Yes, well, if you do some reading, any reading, they're a nice bookmark.
It is indeed, and I'll think of a couple of more people around here
Okay, I
too,
wish you would.
to tell you about. Can I just give them these things?
Absolutely, and my number's there, so have them call me or
Give you a
email
call.
me.
Yeah. As I say, we have one fellow here who is a physician and was in Korea. As I said, probably far behind the lines with prisoners of war work, which is certainly unique, yeah.
Yes.
And we have one gal here who served during World War II. She was a Navy, she was a wave, you know, the Navy
Yes,
was at that time. And she had a very interesting job in Washington. She's now, Fran must be 99 now, I suppose, so she's past her best years, but still very nice gal.
Yeah.
And she comes down to our Friday afternoon. We have a little wine and cheese thing here most
Oh,
Fridays.
do you?
Yeah, you know, stop in sometime. You'd be most welcome if you're here. Yeah, everybody brings a bottle of wine down, or kicks in a couple of bucks, or brings some of the women bring food. And so we have a nice little wine and cheese deal there, and if there's birthdays to be celebrated, they do that. But it's a very good atmosphere here.
Yes.
People get along well. I had more time, we'd show you around a little more, but we have a gym down here on that end. We have a workshop on the other end here, offices here, library, needless to say. So it's a very convenient place to be, to town, And we have beautiful views out on the woods to the west.
Yes.
Too. Except they
Yeah.
just had a burn out there, you know,
Oh,
they
did
had this
they?
controlled burn.
Huh?
Yeah, well, they have to
Controlled
get
burn.
rid of stuff, yeah. So everything kind of black now. It will be nice when the warm weather finally gets here.
Yeah. Finally.
Yeah. Well, listen, many thanks, Bill. You
Well,
appreciate, and
well,
again, I'm
thank
glad
you.
we were able to do this. And
Me too.
I will tell Tom Collier that he'll be very happy to know.
Okay,
that-
I'm sure he
Yeah.
will.
Did you meet him a while